This is the Harmonic Motion Podcast, a place where you, dear listener, can join with automotive aftermarket professionals as they delve into and discuss the matters which matter.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Harmonic Motion Podcast, where I, your host, James Dillon, will talk with Andy Savva, the garage inspector, about all sorts of matters affecting garage industry, the motor trade generally, and how to effectively run your garage business. Sit back and relax and join Andy and I as we kick around various subjects in an interesting and open chat that affects everybody involved with the garage industry. So welcome to this episode of the Harmonic Motion Podcast. I'm here with the man and the legend that is Andy Savva, and I'm delighted to be sat down with my good friend Andy to kick around some of the issues that face our industry. Those of you that know Andy. Those of you that don't are missing out. So I would suggest you get to know Andy, and hopefully the chat that Andy and I are going to have will give you a really good view on why Andy is classed by many in the industry as the top man. Andy, welcome.
Good morning, James. What an honour to be on your podcast, with all the other great people that you've had so far.
Oh, it's great to be speaking with you, Andy. It really is. I'm really excited about this.
I'm excited and nervous.
Yeah, and that's a good way to be. Do you know what they say that, don't they? If it becomes boring, I'm like this with training as well. When I get in front of the crowd and doing things, I still get nervous, and I think that's what keeps it real and makes the enthusiasm going. That if you're not nervous or excited, then you're in the wrong game. So I love that. Yeah, I am too. So, really delighted to have you here, and thanks for giving up your time to chat to our dear listener about all things, hopefully, garage and garage management related. And I really wanted to give the opportunity for the listener to have a little understanding, really, about the origin story. So, Andy Savva, the man, the myth, and the legend, a little bit about your background, the origin story. So, I don't know if you could share that with our.
So I'm a second generation immigrant, if that's the right word to use now. So my parents came over in the 60s to try and make a living in the UK. I was born in 67, had a little bit of a rough upbringing in the early years of my life, and struggled at school. And football was my thing in my years, and sport, that was sort of my getaway. I struggled in reading and writing, and I happened to end up at Southgate Technical College at the young age of 16, 17, doing a City and Guilds motor vehicle studies course, level 1 and 2, whatever it was called then. And how did I end up there? I ended up there because our school teachers thought, well, the motor trade is a good place for you to go because you can't read and write, So, and that's how I got into the motor trade as such. Roll on a few years working for a couple of independents, a franchise dealer. At a very young age, having not very good experiences working for these people, So I'm gonna reveal something now to the Joe public, our garage folk. I wasn't a very good mechanic. I was quite nervous, and in my early years, as you would know, wiring and electrical things were so simple compared to now. Yet for me, they were very, very enormous, and there were things that I really struggled with. So I remember one of my foremans always gave me electrical problems to deal with. So I was a nervous wreck, and I used to get punished for not being able to produce the work or finish it in time. Yet, what they didn't realize is that if they gave me a gearbox to strip out or a cylinder head to remove, and nowadays we were doing a lot of cylinder heads and decoating and all that kind of stuff, I was happy as Larry. And now, years on, I realise how the lack of understanding of people and lack of management in them days, a lot of people suffered, and I was one of them. And at a very young age, I realised that I thought I could do things a little bit better. So at 24, I went and bought a little van, stuck my tools in the van, and I will never forget the registration of the little Fiesta van. It was a little beige Fiesta van. I didn't have a lot of money, and I stick my tools in the back, and I just started knocking on doors and started repairing cars in the streets. And in them days, James, it was quite a right to work in the streets. There weren't the restrictions that you had, the difficulties and restrictions you have now. By this time, I'd met my wife, Lucy, and they had a very famous fish and chip shop called Toffs, Toffs. It's an institution, to be fair now. They don't have it anymore. And I used to go around the back of the alleyway behind the shop and do my repairs behind the shop. And my then father-in-law, I was courting Lucy, but we weren't officially engaged. He said to me, you can't carry on working in the streets. Well, I had no money. And they had a very successful fish and chip shop. They just won the National Fish and Chip Shop of the Year award, the first one ever. He was on Terry Wogan. There was a big hoo-ha in the area. He became a celebrity, my father-in-law, and the family. And to be honest with you, I also took some business acumen from my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, which I'll tell you about in a second. And he says to me, listen, you need to find a place. And I said, well, how am I going to find a place? I've got no money. He goes, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm not going to give you any money, but I'll take you to my bank. You go and find a place, and I will go down as a guarantor. How's that? All right? But you're going to borrow all the money. All right? So a bit of excitement, running around, found this garage, went to the bank, went down as a guarantor, and that's how it all began. And Andrew's garage. So I was one of those techs who had no idea about business, nothing. And I wasn't even a great tech. There you go. So everyone knows now. And I started Andrew's garage literally in 95, I think it was, a year after I got married. A little garage, 3 bays, up the road from the fish shop. And I began life. But one thing I always knew, one thing that I learned from my in-laws is service. If you give people service, they will pay. So they were running this little takeaway and restaurant business. I'll give you an example. My father-in-law would have 200 bags of potatoes delivered to him. He'd open one up, stick the knife in it, pull the potato out and say to the merchant, what's this shit you've delivered to me, Put them all back. And he would never sell anything in his shop that never met his standard, And he built up the reputation like that. So I took some of that lead. I took, if you give people service, you will succeed. And that's how it all began. And then before you know it, roll on, I don't know, 14, 15 years later, I'd sold that, moved to somewhere else, sold that, got a bigger place, sold that, got a bigger place. And then I ended up in North London in a place called Barnet, and it was called Shaftesbury Garage. And in 2005, we were fairly successful. And what is success? There's different ways of, success. And in 2005, I started to think that, there's no life in an independent garage anymore. I saw technology moving then, and I thought you can't be repairing and servicing all makes of vehicles, right? It's very, very hard. So I sold the business. I retained the freehold, which gave me some security, and I went to Loughborough University under the guidance of Professor Jim Saker, who we both know, to do an automotive 3-year automotive retail degree. So for me, it was very daunting, coming from the background that I came from. And I remember going to my first assignment, James. And by then, we'd won the Garage of the Year award in 2001 when I was at Shaftesbury. We won it because we were innovative then by providing free courtesy vans to business owners in 2001. And when I sold that business, we had 14 courtesy vans, I think, 14 or 15 refrigerated vans, cab stars, the old cab stars that the roofers had, and a variety of other transits and all sorts. So That was a cracking business, And I remember turning up at Loughborough University, and I sat down, and we got the first assignment, which was something like only 1,500 words, 3 questions, 500 words each. And I was terrified. I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to complete this. This is how naive I was, right? I came back home after the 2 days. My tutor I will never forget him. My tutor was a guy called Mark Kirkpatrick. Came back, I didn't even know what a Word document was, right? So I went and bought a dictionary. I'm sitting there trying to put 2 words together, and I'm struggling. A friend of mine comes round, who was at the time a commercial director for the Bank of Cyprus. He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've enrolled in a university course and I've got to do these questions." He goes, "Why don't you use Word?" I said, "What's Word?" So he brought me into the world of IT and word count and all that malarkey. And and then I struggled and I wanted to stop. And I remember Professor Jim Saker saying, "You're not stopping. You're the first independent who's come on this course," because it was all retailers, Pendragons, Marshalls, dealer principals, all those kind of people. "You're not going to quit. We're going to support you and help you." So I went back, and Mark Kirkpatrick, what he'd done, he got some assignments that had been finished from 2-3 years ago, and sat there with me for a whole morning at Loughborough and just showed me the ropes, just gave me guidance and supported me in the beginning. Once I got through that first stage, I was fine. And believe it or not, 14 of us started and only 3 finished, and I was one of them. And I was when I graduated and Lucy came and we went to Loughborough, honestly, for me, it was such a huge achievement, because coming from my background, and then but while I was, so the game changer for me was while I was at university, I met this guy who owned a Nissan dealership in Deptford, right? So he goes to me, "You're quite an interesting young man." He goes, "My service department is not doing very well." He said, "Why don't you come in and have a look for me and I'll pay you?" And I said, "I'll tell you what, Brian, I don't want no money. I'd love the experience of just coming in and having a look." Meanwhile, I've got no template, got no idea what I'm going to go into. I went and spent 2 or 3 days with him, spotted lots of stuff, sat in reception for the first couple of hours in the morning, saw the chaos, went back in the afternoon, after visiting the workshop and meeting everyone and seeing what they're doing. And then I went back there in the afternoon about 12:30 to see the chaos when people are coming, getting their cars. And I thought, is this what really happens? These are the gods of our industries. I mean, is this what really happens in these establishments, And then I worked there off and on for about 6 months, turned it around, got my hands dirty, loved it. He turns around and says to me, "I've got a friend of mine who's got a Renault Nissan dealership in Kings Lynn, 40 miles away. He's struggling. I've spoken to him about you. He wants you to go down there." I ended up going down there, same sort of thing. Before you know it, I started picking up work from these dealers, right? Because one's got this dealership, they've got another franchise here, they've got another franchise here. And before you know it, while I'm doing the course, I'm doing all this after sales work for these people. I'm beginning to put some templates together. I've got some kind of process, procedure, and I'm loving it. But and then I've got access to the Nissan factory. And that's where the Kaizen and the Lean and the Six Sigma started, kicked in. And that was the game changer, in actual fact, studying time and motion and how much waste we have in the garage sector, right? And I think when I completed those courses, with what I was seeing in the independent sector, in the franchise sector, how they had all the facilities and all the infrastructure, James, not to fail, yet they were failing left, right, and centre. In actual fact, I would say most of the places that I visited were worse than some of the independents, right? If not all of them. And that energized me and motivated me to say, you know what? There is life in independent, but you have to change the way we do things. And that was the birth of Brunswick Garage in 2009, 2010, when we bought a huge building. You know, it was a huge investment, you know, millions of pounds in the deepest recession then that we ever faced in 2008, 2009. So raising capital and money was very, very difficult. I did my research. I spent 9 months researching what I wanted to create in terms of my brand, the vehicles that we wanted to repair, the layout of the workshop. And then I committed. And we bought, we had 30,000 square feet. We split the building in two, 15,000. I put a parts factory next door to me. Why? Because it's, lean. We had the layout of the workshop and everything else, and we began. And we started in September 2010. James, really from not having a business for 5 years, but now I've got so much more knowledge. And you know what? I had so much resistance. When I started that garage, I was charging £88 an hour 13 years ago. And people were saying to me, you'll never, how are you going to get people through the door? How are you going to get people through the door? I said, just wait and see. My research tells me that there are people that are willing to pay as long as their perception is that they've had value for money, because we're all consumers for everyone else. And we began. And we had a successful business. We had a great business. You know, in 5 years, our turnover went like from zero right up. And really, there's lots of elements that have got to come together. You know, you need the right people, right infrastructure. You have to have a clear message to your audience. The staff have to have self-worth. You know, am I part of this vision? So all this that I learned, the good and the bad from previous, helped me have the great foundations to make Brunswick a success. There's always a risk. Of course there's a risk. But I put my heart and soul in it, and I proved to myself that you can do it. And then BMW came in to buy us. We were a threat to them, you know. The parts manager used to love us because we were spending a lot of money with them. The service manager hated me. So can you imagine, in their same business, they're getting two budgets. The dealer principal saying, you have to sell more parts, young man. And this he's telling the other one, you have to do more servicing. So one hates me and one loves me, you see. So they tried to buy the business. We didn't agree. And then I went next door, and the car parts people bought my business. And I didn't know what I was going to do, apart from I wanted to stay within our sector. By then, as you know, I was on the IAAF board. I started writing some business articles for PMM. I was probably the first one to write these type of articles. I started getting asked to go to events, to present and whatever. And then I rebranded. I thought, you know what, I'm going to rebrand. I created the Garage Inspector. And people started to reach out to me about helping them with their businesses. Why? Well, because I've done it, I've been there. And that's where really the courses came out of, James, which I was honoured to have you on my course back, you know, in the early days, 3-4 years ago, whenever it was. And I sat down to write now, considering I couldn't write years ago. And now I'm writing material to present to others. And the first course, the finance course, took me about 13, 14 months to put together. And I used to go into my, you will laugh at this. I used to go into my barbecue house. I've got a table of 10 in there. And I used to I bought one of these clocks, and I used to time as if I had an audience and I was presenting with coffee break and to see how much material I needed, what was relevant, lunch. My kids thought I was crackers because I was talking in there on my own. All right, but I had to do it because if I was going to deliver, I had to have some kind of a structure. And we started, and then we added the marketing course, which is a bit of a twist on marketing per se. And then we added the effective leadership and managing quality. And then we added the customer excellence and the reception management. And that takes a lot of effort, as you know. You're writing your material. It takes a lot of research. Plus, you have to make it relevant to the audience that you have. And I bring some practical experience. I bring the experience that I see now James, visiting many garages. You know, there's over 500 now in my network. Very honoured, very proud. And I'm going to say this openly. I think I have the best Facebook group of people with the same ideas. These people that we've interacted with, you know, it's a very dynamic group. So I'm very proud of what we've created together with these people. And I'm writing some new material now. And that's really how the Garage Inspector rolls, you know, very passionate about our industry, specifically the independents. And I'm trying to work closely with part suppliers for us for them to understand, you know, the workings of a garage, because some of their practices are not really ideal. You know, might get into that a bit later. So it's not about, you know, shouting and screaming at people. It's about trying to work closely with our stakeholders, suppliers, because we can't do without them, you know. And that's who the Garage Inspector is, in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, great stuff, and really good for you to share that, Andy, because I'm sure some people don't realise that, and the heritage that you've got and the experiences that you've got, you know, make you the man and make that, you know, the product that you're delivering in terms of training highly relevant. I came on that course again knowing I've done some significant amount of training. My story is very similar. I left school with no qualifications, and I ended up doing an engineering degree, and then I got into business management. And so I've done that hard yard, similar sort of story in a way, in terms of education at school didn't work for me because it wasn't really geared in the right way. And I did that thing. So I've got great empathy with that story and the challenge of, you know, it sounds brilliant, sticking with it. And then the business degree up at Loughborough, you being, you know, one of the last men standing, you know, shows that level of tenacity. And I think, you know, that really shines through. So amazing. Yeah.
And I think, and I remember, and I still stay in contact with the two boys who finished, Gareth and Darren. You know, Darren's now a retail director for Renault. And he's doing well. And Gareth is in Chelmsford, bless him, you know, and he's gone up high up. So, and we all wanted to finish. The other people who were there on a tick box exercise, you know, they got sent by the dealership, you know. But we went through it and we shared our own stories, and it's brilliant. And I remember also when you came on the course, you gave me some feedback, and it was important for me to get that feedback from a fellow, you know, more experienced trainer than me, and I took that on board. And what I've done over the years, James, is the courses have been adapted. We've improved. The venues have improved. What we offer is improved. And you know how fussy I am, you know, to get all the little bits right, because it's the little bits that make the difference in all our businesses. It's not the big chandeliers, you know. It's all the little elements that we take for granted that make you from good to great. You know, and I will keep hopefully evolving. So as long as I've got my energy, and I will never lose my passion for the industry and the people. As long as I've got the energy and I'm fit and well, then I'm going to carry on.
Yeah, and a great service that you're doing. And you don't need me to tell you that, Andy, but you know that your group, as you mentioned, is brilliant. I'm in that group, and I sit from the sidelines occasionally. I find there's something I might chip in and contribute, but the dynamic inside that group of and they're people that have been on your training that are in that zone of running garage businesses. I have to say it's immensely supportive. There are some really good thought-provoking posts from people with experience down at the deep end, and I have to say I agree. It's so supportive that there is the collaborative approach to problem solving, and even just thoughts. You know, Mike Field is a prolific poster, I know.
Oh, he's brilliant.
He is, and he posted one about, and one of my pet subjects is thinking about thinking. So how to change the mindset of problem solving. Sometimes it isn't just about considering the problem; it's about how you're considering the problem. It sounds bonkers, but Mike hit a nerve with me. Particularly, one of my passions is the thought process of thinking, and it just, you know, inspires others to, you know, change their mindset. So I would agree. The group that you've got going on there is immense, and as you say, I think that adds immense value to your offer to garages that are looking to, you know, develop their offer and think about doing things differently. The support group goes alongside, and I say dovetails brilliantly with your face-to-face offer, where they're getting coaching skills and they're getting some processes. Then the group is immensely supportive of each other. So yeah, hats off. It is amazing.
And I've sort of taken a back step a little bit now because the group's managing itself. You know, like you'll go in, you know, when you think, and I'll have a little dabble in there, but the group is managing itself. And obviously there's people that are more proactive than others, but you'll always get people, you know, giving their opinions and views. And Mike and Tina also from TCM and a few others have, you know, very vocal, very, very in there. And I take my hat off to them, and I'm so grateful to have these people around us, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It is great. Yeah, it is spot on. Andy, that brings me on to the next question. So I'm wondering how on earth people ask me this question, so I feel I can ask it to you. How on earth do you achieve the things you achieve in the time that you've got? And that sort of brings me on to what does a successful day in the life of Andy Savva look like? How would you explain that?
I'm not gonna use the word chaotic. I'm gonna say it's managed chaotic. Yeah. So it's difficult because my days are full. My diary is, by November, the first 7-8 months of the next year, it's, you know, half full, right? Now, the difficult thing I've got is I'm on my own. I do everything by myself. So that takes its time, admin, organization, and all that. But if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. So it's not a chore, right? And the problem I have is that I'm so motivated to help people, I never say no. It's very difficult for me to say no. So how do I manage my time? Well, I've learned to manage my time by allowing myself hours and days in the year for me, my time. Now, my time could actually be working on new material without getting, and that's relaxing for me because I know I'm doing something that I enjoy and something that's going to be worthwhile in the end when it's received by others who need it. All right. I'm very keen on my cycling and I'm very keen on my golf. So I've got that, fit that in. I've also got 3 adult kids now that are going into their next scenario of their lives. So we've got to be there for them. I've also got, you know, my wife, Lucy, who's taken care of all of us for the last 35 odd years and has been an immense pillar of strength. So we have to have some time together. And I remember Christmas, just before Christmas, she said, I don't want to go on a summer holiday this year, you know. So I said, well, you better get some dates in the diary now because any spare gaps, I'll say yes to other things. So you have to be a bit selfish, and you have to plan your diary and just leave some gaps and just put me. What I do, I leave gaps and I just put me. And that me could be anything. It could be working on new material, could be on my bike, golf, socializing, whatever else. It does get sometimes a bit tough, especially when you're on your road for 2 or 3 days. So I've just come back from Peterborough, where I got engaged by a chap called Mo Datta, who's got 3 sites. So we've done his branch managers in his front of house. So it's the first part of a long-standing relationship, hopefully, that we're going to have with them. I make sure the next 2 days I have nothing on. So it's very important for me to have that structure. So I've spent 3 days away. It's been intense. It's full on. You know, it's 8-9 hours a day. The next 2 days, obviously, I'm doing the podcast with you now. But that's fine because I'm at home. So when we finish, the rest of the afternoon and all of tomorrow is Good Friday anyway. But the bank holidays don't make no difference to me. And also Saturday, Sundays are normal days for me. So it doesn't really matter because I don't work on Monday to Friday job. So the next few days is my time. And that will be a combination of the things that I've told you. But when you're working in the garage itself, it's far more difficult to do. Because I remember you take things home with you, something's gone wrong, you lock up, it's in your mind, you go home, everyone around you gets affected. And these are the struggles that I had in my early years. I never understood the people effect and the business effect of how it affects you in your personal life. It never leaves us, James. It's always with you, you know? But I manage it by just making sure that my diary is full of the work that I want to do. It's organized, it's planned. but then I make sure I leave gaps in there. And all I do is just put me, and that me could be a variety of things.
Yeah, getting in touch with yourself. It's really important. I know I'm a big fan. I read it many, many years ago of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I've got it. I've got the book. Yeah. I've read it. I always tap into it.
And that reminded me, what sprang to mind then was sharpen the saw. You know, that time where the old story of the woodcutter cutting too much wood and the blade goes dull and his effectiveness drops, and actually taking time out to sharpen the saw. So that's what sprung to mind. And I'm a great advocate, as you know, if you followed my social media, I love to get out on the bikes.
With your cycling and in the field, and that's your getaway, you know? And I've got my getaway, and I think we all need that. We must have that. Even if it's not as much as we'd like, we must have an element of that, you know? And when I go out cycling on my bike, that's my thinking time, that's my chill out time. And I think we all need that. We need something away from our chaotic lives, because there's pressure everywhere, James, you know, cost of living crisis, staff crisis, you know, customers, you know, everything. I'm not sure people really appreciate. I don't think vehicle owners and I don't think consumers in general appreciate how difficult it is to be in the garage sector. I think for me, it's probably one of the hardest industries to be in, because and that brings its pressure, and that's why we need to have that release. You know?
And it's tricky. I think in two ways there, Andy, that strike for me. One is the consumer not really understanding about business. Not that they should, but there needs to be that little bit of empathy that, you know, the garage man or woman is providing for their children and their families in running a business. And the other big one, always, that there's a great disconnect is between employees and team members and business owners, and how the relationship there can be a lack of empathy both directions. So, you know, garage owner to car driver, there's a bit of a disconnect, and employees to self-employed or business people, which can create that bit of pain and pressure from a lack of empathy and not really understanding. But you're absolutely right. I think for me, my experience of business ownership, we don't really deal in great depth with that, but we do see a lot of people that run garages coming on training for technical subject matter. And, you know, in some of the downtimes, thinking about and trying to remind people actually that taking time out, the business will run you. It will take up all of your time that you let it, if you don't have those fire breaks, like your diary days that are down to you.
Yeah, and that's why I created the Leadership and Managing course, because I was seeing so much of this. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do a little bit of a subject on this and cover some of my experiences in my early years, middle, and now, and hopefully, you know, get people to think about it. And you are right about the disconnect, and I'm going to touch on a point now which I see very regularly. So what you'll find, I've already mentioned that I believe our industry is one of the hardest to be in. There's 2 reasons for that. The first is that consumers don't really want to come to us anyway in the first instance. So we're already minus. We're already trying to push water up a hill, because they don't want to come and see us. They might walk in smiling, but they don't really want to be with us, you know. It's not like we're going into a restaurant or, you know, going to a theatre or something where we want to do it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, as you alluded to at the beginning of our chat, the beginning of garage life for people is that they're a good tech. And also then they've got a business. So they don't understand the business mechanics very well, right? All they know is that they can repair a car, and I've got ramps, and that's it, and far away. So that's the first part. The second part is the disconnect that you get. So that's the disconnect from, and the difficulties of a garage owner and the consumer side of it. The second part is what you said, was the disconnect, which I see so regularly, between the sort of workforce, the techs and front of house, and the garage owner. Because what happens is that the workforce see multiple cars coming in every day. Everyone's running around like a blue-ass fly, right? Chaos. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Madness. 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And they think the garage owner's earning millions. They think he's earning, or he or she's earning a fortune. But what, bless them, what they don't know, they're not earning a fortune. They're probably earning a salary, and maybe a little bit more if they're lucky, right? And that's the disconnect that you have. And that's why I shared my financial information in my latter life of my garage career with my team. I wanted them to understand, where we are and what things cost. When I told them it's £1,000 a week rates, before we rates, to pay, not pay rates, £1,000 a week. Really? What, that much? And the insurance for this building and everything I have is 24 grand a year. So before you know it, I need to find 80 grand a year. Forget about all the other stuff. And I think it's important for us as garage business owners to make your team aware that, you know what, boys and girls, we're not earning as much as what you think. And that's down to our lack of business understanding and our offerings and what we're trying to do. And that's why there's a disconnect.
And there's maybe sometimes a bit of resentment, isn't it? I think sometimes the technician or technician workforce and service reception and admin think that the garage man is hugely profitable. And when it comes to, pay rises and maybe new equipment where the garage man is looking at his own figures going, we can't really afford to do that. Is in a way, it's not the garage, it's the technician or the team's it's not within their gift to challenge or to change that, but it's up to the garage man and manager to be able to, I think you said wisely, sharing that information and bringing everyone on board, because the changes that you can affect, obviously, to change profitability are based on the team effort. And the team, if it is a team, if it's not two teams, it is one team, and they're buying into that. I'm sure that will, give great emphasis behind what people are doing in their work. I know, I worked in corporate jobs before I became completely unemployable, and looking at teams in corporations that I've always ran a sideline or a small business of some sort. It's part of my culture. It's the way I am. I've always got something going on. And when I joined some of the corporations, and I often looked at people had absolutely no consciousness of the cost of anything, computers and laptops and phones and cars and office space and this, and they're going, I've only had 8% pay rise this year, and the company's turned in this, and there's a lot of resentment. You sort of look at that going, with a foot in both camps, you can go, the machine that is this business isn't maybe as effective as you think it is, and people aren't working to that shared goal and aim. So I think that being open about that takes a bit of courage as well from the garage owner's perspective to include the team in that. And it's
But I found that one of the most motivating aspects of my business, because also, I think you mentioned it earlier, the garage doesn't just feed my family. The garage feeds, I had 12 people in my business. It wasn't, we had huge turnover and the place was massive compared to some, but there was only 12 of us in there. It was a well-oiled machine, very efficient, working on 40 cars a day, 45 cars a day. It's a hugely successful business. However, I'm feeding probably 50, 60 people. The garage is supporting 50, 60 people. So, and it's important for them to know that if we're making good profits because we're doing things correctly, that their jobs are safe, and I will continually invest in them and invest in the business. It wasn't a short-term thing for me, it was long-term. And I think that's the importance of leadership, of communication, sharing, and allowing them also to express their views and ideas. Again, it goes back to, a lot of garage folk get into having their own businesses because they're working for someone who they believe they can do it better. And what happens when they go and open their own, they become employees of their own business. They're not actually managing anything. They become employees. Yeah. So nothing changes. The only thing that changes is that now they've got bricks and mortar and all the operational costs that come with being a garage owner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
And that's what I'm trying to change. That's what I'm trying to teach and change.
Andy, what do you think about the definition? Because it's a really interesting point. And I think there's a lot of guys and girls out there, particularly maybe, with the technician crisis, with the lower availability of garages, with queues and bookings for people to get jobs done in garages. There's a huge opportunity for people inside a garage as an employee looking out going, there's all this work, we've got all this stuff stacked up here. There probably isn't a better time for me to make the jump and go on my own. For me, one of the really relevant, as you mentioned there, you've bought yourself a job. One of the interesting definitions I've heard of a business is you do not have a business unless it can run without you. And,
Correct.
And if you don't, if it doesn't run without you, you essentially have a self-employed job. You're paying.
Yeah.
And so in what's your view about helping people to get to that stage in their garage business life? Where does that?
So I'm gonna put a little twist on your comment, which is correct. What you've also got to remember, though, James, yes, we mustn't be run by our businesses, and we must manage them and manage the people and the operational side of it. I agree with that. But at the end of the day, we must also remember that we are still independents and we're not corporates. And the reason why independents still survive with all the challenges that we have when you compare us against corporates or the fast fits, the nationals, is because vehicle owners, James, when they come in, they like to see you and me. Yes? So I agree with you to a certain point where you have to have your business not run you, and you're running the business, and it's not a business per se. If you can walk away and it's still running, that's fine. Yes, I agree, but there's still an element of you being actively involved in some kind of roles, because that's what consumers want. You know, they'll come in and they're like, "Where's Andy? I want to speak to Andy. Where's James? I want to speak to James. I've got two beautiful, fantastic services front of house. Where's Andy?" You know. And we must never lose sight of that. And that's why the independents will always survive. However, I'm going to go back one step before I answer your question. We as an industry, and I include all aftermarket repairers in this, have created the problems that we have now with the lack of people coming into our industry, the lack of techs, the lack of front of house, right? We have created it. Indirectly, we've all added something to that problem. And now we're all shouting about it, right? Because for 50, 60 years, personally, I believe as an industry, we ain't moved. We haven't changed. Very little, right? So the working conditions are generally poor. We're a very flat organization. There's no departments. Everyone's trying to do everything. It's 8 hours of chaos. There weren't these it's only been the last, I'd say, 7, 8 years that we've been able to tap into training, whether it's technical like yours, equipment that the OE dealers use. So we're able to tap into this kind of infrastructure that we can. Yet our salaries are low. So I think for 50, 60 years, the vehicle owners have got away with it with us. They don't get away with it when they go to a main dealer, and they get a substandard service, right? So we've created collectively this shortage of personnel, right? There ain't no course that anyone can go on to do front of house training. Where'd you go to get front of house? Yeah, you're good on the phone, sit on the front desk. You know, that's how it all evolves, doesn't it? So, and the industry, to be honest with you, since COVID, I've never known it to be busier. All right. The lead time used to be 4 days. Now it's like 3 weeks is normal. I mean, who would have thought 3 weeks to get your car into an independent garage? And that's brought its challenges. And then you got mechanics in the workshop thinking, do you know what? I reckon I can go and open my own. But there are challenges to that. And the risks may not be, the rewards may not be as big as what you think they are. Just look at your own boss, your own leader, or whatever you want to call him or her, because you're going to go and do exactly the same. Now, the first challenge that these people will have is premises. Finding premises is one of the biggest challenges. Why? City centres now don't want garages. They'll kick you out. A lot of the buildings that were used for garages previously are now worth more for development. So there you go. So we're getting less space. Plus, another challenge which I've faced in the last 3-4 years is even if you go out of town and you find an industrial unit or industrial estate, the moment you mention you want to open a garage, on your bike, governor. Yeah, on your bike, sir. So what end up, they want you because it's the image of, greasy, dirty monkeys. That was years ago. I don't think it's so relevant now. So what you end up doing is getting premises that are inadequate for a garage, that are not efficient in the space that you have, whether it's parking or the layout. You leave your current employer. You go in thinking you can do it better, and you end up being the same and worse. And then you're scratching your head because all of a sudden you've got to answer the phone call, you've got to make the booking, you've got to create the relationships with your suppliers. I need tooling and equipment. Where's that going to come from? All of a sudden you're producing 2 or 3 hours of work in a 9-hour day. And you think, oh, I need people. Okay, so you go and find people. Where are they? And the cycle just continues. It continues and continues. So it's not easy, but it's not impossible. You have to do your research. You have to decide what marketplace you're going to be in. What type of services am I going to offer? Am I going to offer all my services? I used this analogy yesterday, actually, about running a fruit and veg shop, just to get a point across. So I'll mention it. So it's like you running a fruit and veg shop and you're selling all this fruit and all this veg, but you don't measure it. So you don't know what your bananas are making you. You don't know what your apples are making you, your cabbages. But if you measured this stuff, you can then say, you know what? I'm not selling the bananas and I'm not selling the green apples. I'll focus on the red apples and the cabbages because I'm measuring it, it's making more money. And people, I think, are bemused that you have to offer everything to everyone. No. You just need to understand what your marketplace can allow you to have wherever you're going to be based. Your skill levels are important. And also, what is your overall vision? What is it? No one has a vision. I go into a garage and say, what's your vision? Where do you want to be? What are you talking about? What's your vision? What do you want to accomplish? So it's not that easy. It's not that easy to have your own business.
I agree. Do you think the lack of the vision, Andy, is that indicative that they are just self-employed? They haven't set out with a vision. They haven't set out with a goal. They haven't set out with a plan. No plan.
No, there's no plan. There's no plan, James. It's just, I can do it better. All of a sudden, I've got a little building, 2-3 ramps, and I'm away. But the part supplier is 10 miles away, or, I don't want to use these parts, or, where am I going to get my, there's just so many obstacles. There's so many, I use another analogy. Anyone can paint the wall once it's been prepared. We're all great painters once it's been painted. And I don't think enough folk prepare or plan or research. There's not enough of that. I'm not saying you can't be successful. Of course you can. And there's many garage owners that we know that have been successful, but they weren't successful at the beginning, and they've trodden along and they've gone through hurdles like we all have. And I was one of those. I was exactly one of those, right? And I don't think enough time or thought is focused on your branding, your logo, how powerful a brand can be, what does it represent. All of this has to be thought about. I spent 9 months of my life researching the Brunswick garage model. Even with the expertise that I thought I had and the experiences that I'd gone through, I still spent 9 months of my life planning, preparing, getting my product where I think it should be before I put the switch on, as they say. And I don't think enough of that happens nowadays.
It strikes me, from a technical perspective, a lot of garage owners generally come along the journey that you and I have had, that we've been mechanical repair technicians in a workshop, and we can sort of do the business end of the business, but not the business of the business end. So we can fix the cars, but we can't do the business. And, what would you, if you could think about, let's say we've got a garage tech in that position that's listening to us today, what advice can we give them about the preparation? So what would you advise some level of fundamental business training? So, get your head around what marketing is, get your head around the basics of profit, loss and balance sheets, get your head around a little bit about customer service, get your head around the organization of a business, how can we facilitate? So, Joe that wants to jump out in his own garage, we would say, number one, don't do it tomorrow, make a bit of a plan. Where would they go, Andy? What sort of resources exist to get them on the right track?
I seek advice from people that have been through that road and other peers. And now we're in a world now, James, where there are loads of social media groups. There's probably loads of social media groups in other businesses like we have in our own, right? So you've got the diagnostic ones, you've got the business ones. So there is help out there, loads of help. So just tap into people's knowledge, their experiences, write it all down, think about it. So there are help. Obviously, I offer these business services, but I'm not the only one. There's not many of us around, but there are other people who may not be offering business services, but are also garage owners that have been through that. So I think the first thing for me is seek advice and seek help, right? I think also the biggest advice I'd give people is, where is your strength? Where are you going to be in your little organization? Because this goes back to being a flat organization and trying to be everything for everyone. You can't do that anymore, James. You can't answer the phone, raise the job card, fix the car, do the payroll, think about your marketing, think about your promotional stuff, deal with supplier terms, deal with HR. And this is the problem. You have to, I think, before you begin, is decide where you sit. Now, if you're a very, very good master tech, I suggest, young man, or young woman for that matter, you stay in the workshop so you can earn the revenue, but you must find other people to do the other roles. You can't do everything. And that's the key, because what you have to remember is that the only people in the garage business that create value or revenue, not value, revenue, are the techs. So if you're one of those and you decide to stay on the front desk, well, you better find someone as good or better than you in there. And it's difficult, and it's very, very difficult. So I think research, seek advice, help, go on as many, if you can, and you've got the time, go on as many business courses as you can. And it doesn't have to be the garage inspector business courses. It could be external courses, colleges, a night course, or whatever else it is. The internet now is a vast library of information. All right. And I think it's about setting a plan. It's right. What services am I going to do? What tooling do I need to do that? What's my brand going to be? What's my colors are going to be? What's my logo going to be? What am I going to represent? What community am I going to be in? What's the infrastructure like in my community, in my district? So many things that they have to consider. But if they've done all that and they still feel they can do it,
yes, yeah, absolutely. If it was, you're dead right, Andy. Yeah. So the planning bit really. So probably how to avoid getting yourself, because I think what my witnessing is where somebody's had a go and they've jumped into it, the machine or the business starts running that person ragged, and it develops its own gravity, and this business is spinning around, and the person's dragged with it, and the happiness levels drop, the efficiency drops. So I think a check, probably what you're saying, if I summarize that, is if you have a plan to run the business, show that plan, talk about that plan to somebody else before you commit to starting the business. So your plan has to be set.
100%. And maybe not one person, maybe 2 or 3 different people get 2 or 3 different views. There's an enormous amount of help out there, and the thing is, I don't think enough people have done enough of that planning stage. They just dive in and then they can't swim, right? And it's tough. And they become an employee of their own business, as I mentioned earlier.
Once you're in the muck, and once you have to make the bills pay, you sacrifice those other things we spoke about. So you've got to make the payroll if there's more than one of you. You've got to make the rent, the rate, the insurance payments. You don't get any time. Once you start the machine of the business running, you don't have time to take your foot off the gas, do you? As an owner manager with no clue and it not going particularly well, once you start that journey, you can't have a second start because you can't stop it. because you've got everything you've got is in that business, and you have to then almost manage without having any time to manage. You end up doing the planning whilst you're in the muck and bullets of the war of business. Yeah. And you have to plan. It's just whether you pre-plan or whether you try and plan with and stop this thing coming off the rails.
Yeah. And what happens is that the day finishes, the week finishes, the quarter finishes, 6 months have gone past, and you think, shit, what have I achieved? All you get, all that's achieved is that the stress levels have gone up. And up and up and up, and that's the problem. In the last sort of 2 years of my garage business, I was in and out. I felt I was running the business, and that's a very, very humbling position to be in. When your team, when you walk in one morning and your team say to you, "What are you doing here? Go and get on your bike, or go and play your golf and come back later on." That's when you know you've achieved success. Yeah. And then you're the joker in the pack, Andy's on holiday for a week. Okay, I'll step on front desk. And you love doing it for the week because it's only for a week, innit, or 5 days. Nick's away, you do back off, whatever. And because you've done all those roles, it's nice to do it for a few days. You're the joker in the pack. And that's the fundamental of where you want to get to. So I decided very early on with Brunswick that I didn't want the business to run me. I didn't want to have a role. I wasn't going to be front of house. I wasn't going to be, the MOT tester. I wanted to be, I think it was Peter Drucker, the famous guru, he goes, you want to be the helicopter on top, looking at everyone and just diving in like whenever someone needs you, But we don't get to that because people don't plan, I think, enough and seek advice from others who've been through it. And there's these, there's a lot of business coaches all of a sudden, all over the place. So, and obviously the social groups that have been created. I remember we created I think it was maybe you who started was it the support group, whatever it was called, and it got vast in it after it got a little bit out of hand towards the end because there was so many, and we were trying to do. I mean, I was spending hours trying to put forms together and letters together and helping everyone, but. They're the kind of things that are available to people now. And the resource that we have available to us, James, now, in terms of tooling, equipment, technical information, in theory, if you really do put the time into all this, you can have a very nice, small, profitable business, serving your local community,
yes,
and doing very well
and
yourself.
Offering the services that, number one, people want, and number two, that make a profit. And it struck a bell there about your analogy with the fruit and vegetable people. Picking your product line that turns the profit, that makes your business worth working at. One of the other questions, I suppose, and comments that I often hear, we took to running in terms of managing finance. So one of the big questions is, okay, you're a technical guy and you can fix the cars, and you start to run the business, and a bit like wiring diagrams for a technician, I'm going to draw a parallel here as financial statements to a garage manager is a bit like wiring diagrams to a technician, that you can't get it. So one of the things that struck me in the conversations we have with people here is it comes around to the end of year. So, and we'll talk about accountants because I know you've got a very interesting view on accountants and accountancy and their functions.
Don't start me off because they're all going to batter me after this, isn't it? But I'm going to share my view, but I'm going to share it with
one of the comments that comes up quite often is, do you know what, I've had a meeting with the accountant, we've had the end of the year, and the year might end in April, and the accountants come round in May or June, and they've gone, right, here are the books, and in whatever the books look like in inverted commas, and it's a couple of sheets of paper and a thing. And the accountant sits there with his Mont Blanc pen, and he goes down through the list and says, "Here's your, here are the, and great news, you've made XDX profit this year." And the guys, they're going like, well, hang on a minute, well, where is it then? If I've had all this money, where's it bloody gone? And that, in terms of, I think, in terms of a health check of, are you in control of your business? If that scenario is you in your business, I would venture to suggest that you probably aren't in as much control as you should be, because I adopted a mechanism here, Andy, very, very basically, and it's written by a guy, Mike Michalowicz from the US, and it's profit first. And the principle of profit first is you take your profit first. So your invoices that you raise, you allocate proportions of that. So we run it here, and then I show some people that, and I said, look, I can tell you how my business is doing in a blink. What do you mean? I said, well, I've set this thing up with the accounts, and I've got a profit, and I've got an anticipated profit that my business has to make to me, and we set an allocated percentage of the turnover, which has to drop into the profit pile, and that takes the running expenses and all that sort of stuff. So I can tell you, the invoices get allocated as they come in, and they're split across, and I can show you my bank account. This bank account here, it's called profit, and I can tell you, I can replicate back how we've done that quarter. Why? Because I can see the profit number. And if you've got profit, you've got a business. Whereas if you've got turnover, you've got busyness. And that's probably the difference between business. And so talking about accountants, so I think as a snapshot, if you're a garage that get the accountant coming in June to your April year end and said you've made a load of money and you go, where is it? I think there's probably a flag to start thinking about managing your profitability. But second one, when I know, and why I'm raising this, because I know you've got some really strong views, is what the accountant brings to your business. So a lot of garages have the view that the accountant is a mystical wizard that lives up a mountain with a big pointy hat and a wand and a crystal ball, and he wiggles it and jiggles it, and he is the oracle that will drive your business. And in fact, it's the accountant is a service provider for you as a business owner, and he should be able to help you in the aspects that he's an expert in to guide you in your progress of a business. So what would you say to garages that are getting the profit conversation in July and going, where did it go? And then thinking about what they need to do, technical services for accountancy.
So this is a big topic for me because obviously we cover a lot of it in the finance, right? And you're right, I have a big gripe about most accountants, right? Now, I've got to be very careful how I say it. Accountants have skills that we don't have, okay? They go through a huge amount of training, teaching, whatever they go through, and they're very, very skilled in what they do. However, I have found very, very conclusively that they don't understand the metrics of most garage businesses, okay? In actual fact, they probably don't understand the metrics of a lot of other industries. They may focus on one industry more than others, but generally they're auditors, bookkeepers, who we have to have because we have to have our accounts in a UK legal format. Okay? Now, profit is not cash. So I say to people, when your accountant says to you, he or she says to you, oh, you've made £50,000 profit, can you open a drawer and find that 50 grand? No, you're looking around thinking, what's he or she talking about? I haven't got 50 grand lying around in my bank account or in my pocket or in my drawer. They must have got things wrong, but they haven't. So profit is not cash because it gets consumed in the year of you running your business, right? And it affects our cash flow. So one of the things, as you know, that we teach is you need to have separate accounts so that you can budget. So your main account is just an operational account where money coming in, and then you have these other spiral accounts that go out. So like you, I have a tax account, I have a VAT account, and I have a profit account. And I put it all, I know when I invoice, how much is the VAT because I've charged it, so I move it to one side. I also know how much profit I'm making because I understand my margins for the products that I'm giving, and I put that away. The problem that you have is that, again, we go back to the beginning where we have no business acumen and we rely on the accountant. But the accountant doesn't rely on anyone apart from you to provide him the information or her because it's historical data. It's already happened. You know, a lot of them will give them all the paperwork, you know, all the invoices, so they're paying additional money to the bookkeeper to do the inputs. And then you have this scenario where they're buying their parts from the parts factor, but now they're also buying tools and equipment from the parts factor. So the £5,000 they put in as their purchase statement for the month includes hand tools, which they can't get back as the equipment depreciation, and it reduces their margins on their parts. And I have to go in and go back 12 months and find all this malarkey. And then I have to get the phone and pick up the accountant and say, Mr. Accountant, you've made a bit of an error here because my garage customers lost £3,000. Why is that then? Well, because, you've put tools and equipment in the parts purchases, my friend. Oh, but it's down to him. No, it's not down to him. Maybe you should be working closely together, isn't it? If you understand a bit more about his business and he understands about what you can do, then maybe we don't have these discrepancies. So this is what you have. So data that we create is historical. It's our data. And one of the fundamental things about finance is I urge all garage owners to understand it and use the skills of the accountant to help you. It's too late. Once you've given him or her all the stuff, it's finished. But the biggest problem we have, James, is, and I've had so many run-ins with accountants. Now, I'm lucky. I've got a good one. My accountant, Milton, who's now picked up loads of our garage folk, he understands the motor industry like as good as me, if not better. Why? Because I forced him to, and then I used his skills. So he taught me stuff. I can't put an Excel spreadsheet for love or money. Milt, this is what I want to measure. I'll do the formula for you, and that's it. That's all I want. So what I'm saying is this is a crucial partnership. So I'm going to it takes me to the next point, which you've heard me say before. 99% of garages, send me anywhere you want, anywhere in the country, 99% of the garages do not make money on their labour. And the accountant can't tell them that. So imagine that. You're paying £4,000, £5,000. He or she will spend 25 minutes with you at the end of the year. Oh, accounts. Mont Block Ben, as you said, there's my invoice, it's got to be paid, $4,500. And they haven't told them that you're not making any money on what you're selling, but I've made a profit. Where's that profit come from then? And this is like, it drives me up the wall. So learning your figures, understanding the metrics of the services and the products and the operational costs that you have are crucial. They're the basis of any business, James. You can be the best master tech, you can be the best gearbox repairer, you can be the best aircon man. It doesn't matter. If you don't know what it's costing you, if you don't know what that hour, that time's costing you, then you're finished. And this is why the finance course was born, because every time I try to have a half decent conversation with a garage owner about their accounts, honestly, bless their little hearts, because I was there, it's like talking to a white wall. So financial understanding, the key performance indicators that affect our businesses, how our accounts have made up, measuring the right stuff, because if you put shit into and this is where I go back to the garage, we talk about garage systems, and there's been lots of talk in our Facebook group about garages. It's driving me up the wall. It's driving me up the wall because you can put shit in a garage system. What you're going to get in the back, you're going to get shit. So it's key to input correctly in order to give you a chance to get the outputs correctly, and that financial bit and having a close relationship with your accountant is critical, and getting them to understand. So what happens? Most garages up and down the country, James, only survive because of the parts buying. So the only commodity that we have to sell, the only thing that me and you have got to control, that no one can control for us, which is our labour, time, skill, knowledge, all those years we've worked to master our craft, and we give it away. And we continue to give it away.
Continue to give it away, and that's what you said.
And the only way we survive is from the parts buying.
That's somebody else's game.
There's no other industry that does it. I don't know anyone else.
Because the people don't know the numbers, Andy. Would you agree that if we took our potential garage owner and he said, Andy, what is the one thing I need to be an expert in before I start the business? Would it be the numbers? Would it be you need to understand only that?
Only that. Right. We only sell one thing, James, right? I'm just going to really make it simple for everyone, right? Let's assume I sell this bubble gum. That's the only thing I sell, right? Okay. I bought this bubble gum for 50p. I know that I have to sell this for more in order for me to have a chance to survive. But how much more? How much more do I have to sell it for? I don't know, unless I calculate other operational costs, plus how many of these do you think I can sell in a week? Yes? Because if I don't sell the amount that I've got to sell, then the cost of these will go up. And it's the same with labor. Labor is the commodity for us. So you're open, I don't know, if you're open, I don't know, 4 techs, I don't know, 8,000 hours a year. Yeah, 40 hours a week, whatever, right? So you potentially can sell, but I want to know what my hourly cost is to enable me to charge that rate to allow me to make a profit on my labor. And that's where they go wrong. No one, I'll go in, what's your labour rate? 55 quid. Why is it 55 quid, cunt? Oh, yeah, it's just like going rate, isn't it? You know, he's about 52, he's about 58, 55 sounds about right, isn't it? Yeah? Well, you can't tell me why you haven't calculated, you're not operational productivity. No, it's about 55 quid, yeah. I mean, it's madness. I don't get it. And it's like, okay, I can say that I've made a bit of a change for those that have interacted with us and we've had a chance to, yeah? But I'm one person, James. There's 15,000 bloody garages up and down the country, man. It's like, you know, how am I going to get to these people? So the vehicle owners got away with it for years. You know? So unless you know, that's my building, these are my costs, everything, that's your salary, your dividend, anything that comes out of that, you need to account for. So I need to know, because we're selling our commodity as a time, as a unit, I need to know what it's costing me. Because if I don't know what it's costing me, I can't sell it. So I'll give you a stat that I did the other day, right? Because I got interviewed for a magazine, Autocar, whatever it was. They're doing this survey. So I've got about 1,600 different accounts on my Master Excel that Milton, my accountant, did for me. Yeah. And these are updated because these are customers that I've interacted with, you know, from day one. And I get updated accounts and I put them on there, the figures that I need, and I get an average. The average labour rate up and down the country is 64 quid an hour. Do you know what my average cost of opening is? The cost of that labour per hour? 58. And that, I'm telling you, that figure is like gospel, yeah? I believe I have the best, most accurate data of anyone when it comes to this kind of data, all right? Because it's such a wide spectrum of garages all over the UK, 1,600 garages, right? It's £64 is the average, and £58 is the average for them to open their doors. And they don't know why they're not making any money. The accountant can't help them.
That's crazy, isn't it? When you put it in those terms, that is crazy.
I can't get a plumber to come and knock on my door, James. No, just to ring the doorbell for 100 quid. And he ain't got no premises and ramps. And then when he walks through the door, the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
You
probably have to pay him before he even rings the bell. He'll want to take your payment.
Don't worry. I'm telling you, 100 before I told you, before he rings that doorbell, I want 100 quid.
That's crazy.
And we're charging 64 quid to work on a modern vehicle today and provide this great service. Why do you think people are pulling their hair out? So if anyone wants to go and open one on their own, give me a ring first, sir.
Yeah, it is crazy. Often, Andy, when you put it in those terms, kicking around that conversation with technicians that we have here and owner managers is, I think there's a perspective that garage people that fix cars sell their service like they were buying their service. And they look at that, and so they say, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'll tell you what, look in my workshop out there, and look, I've got my car outside, and let's imagine I finish on my course and it's at 6:30 on Wednesday, and I go out to my car and I put the key in the car and it goes click, click, and I go, what could that be? I don't know. It's late. I would go back into the office. I would get the key bag out and I would look around and go, I'll take the blue one tonight. So I get out, I get the blue one and I go home in that and I leave the other one there and it is zero drama, no drama. And I might think about that and I might have a little diggle dag. Anyway, the cost or the problem of that car breaking down to me, it's got zero impact. It doesn't really matter because I've got 10 other cars out there. And therefore, the value to me of having that fixed is quite low because I'll go in my lunchtime and I'll go, click, yeah, there's a wire broken there, fix it, done. So as a seller of a service, I think garages don't change the mindset. And so we have a scenario, we go, okay, that's me coming out of work and I click, the car doesn't start, no drama, grab a key bag, go home and fix it. As a seller of a service, you maybe have to take the perspective of a woman with her kids outside the swimming pool in January. Kids have got dripping wet hair. They press the button on the car, click, nothing happens, right? The world starts to fall apart now because the kids are hungry. They'll start fighting. The husband's at work. The car now doesn't start. And the value to get that car fixed from that person's perspective is much, much greater. Right, so the value to fix that car is huge compared to my value to fix the car. But when I'm both the service provider and the seller, I think a lot of garages don't realize the value that they offer to people. And I'll give you one other thing, Andy, along that journey. And I go, do you know what? The lady that sat outside the swimming pool with the kids with dripping wet hair was in your garage 3 months ago, and she had a problem. It's a Ford Galaxy. And she had a problem with her EGR valve, and you diagnosed it, and you gave her a ring. Your front counter that they think their job is to call people. They don't think their job is to sell service and value. And you priced up 2 parts. You said your Ford Galaxy, went to Ford, and that they want 999 quid for an EGR valve. And I phoned my parts vendor, and they want 222 quid. And you said to the customer, it's your EGR. We've got these two. We priced it up for you. One is 222 and one is 999. Which would you choose? And I said, whoa, and let's freeze time now. Let's stop the planet. What have you given the customer as an option about the difference of those two things? Well, you've given them a number, right, okay. And if they're judging on numbers, would they ever choose the highest number? No, they'd be crazy, wouldn't they? No, okay. So why would you choose the higher number? Well, because we know that the EGR valve from Ford is going to potentially last the life of the car. It's not going to give them a problem, and we would buy the 999. So, but if you look at what you just said to your customer, you've only given them the number to differentiate on. So I said, imagine now, take you back to the lady outside the swimming pool, kids with dripping wet hair. If you explain that situation when you were talking the difference between 222 and 999, this will not leave you stranded outside the swimming pool with dripping wet hair. That's why the Ford EGR valve costs 999 quid. How do you think the conversation goes down as a value proposition? Because what they want is no pain in their life in the future. They don't want the cheapest part. But as a seller, and maybe some of the expertise of garages selling their service is, one, the labor is undervalued because they're buying like they're selling. And 2, they can't show the value proposition for the difference in the parts. And coupled with what you've just declared about the cost of doing business versus the labor rate, the sale, it brings us steaming into the point that how does a garage pay a technician the going wage to fill the 3 gaps that they've got in their workforce? How on earth can it happen?
Well, that's why we haven't got people coming into the industry, because we're not earning the revenue to support these people. I mean, there's techs that have been working on cars for 25 years, they're on 35 grand. My son, who's 27, is on 70 grand a year. He's green behind the ears, and he was moaning over that. They give him a slap. So don't moan about your salary, son. Yeah? And your analogy there is perfect. So at Brunswick, James, we never gave people a choice. This is the repair. This is the part. This is the labour to get the job done correctly. And the analogy that I will sum up your story with, which everyone will relate to, is this, which is I use in my training. I don't walk into a restaurant when the waiter comes to me and says to me, all right, Gov, well, this is the shit menu, don't know where the food's come from, and this is the good men you like. You know what I mean? I know which one I will choose, and I know what people will choose. There's no comparison. So as garage owners, you're right. We shoot ourselves in. We've created all these problems. You know, we buy cheap, we sell cheap because we don't understand the value, right? At the end of the day, I don't go into a restaurant and dictate. They supply me what they think is the best, isn't it? And I'm willing to pay for it. And as garage owners, it's the educational part of explaining to people. And again, it goes back to the front of house. There's no training for front of house. You can answer the phone. Good, that's good. You're on there. How are they going to get that message across? So for me, it's about, you don't give people choices. You fit quality OE parts, offer them the guarantee, mostly 2 years now with all this stuff, right? And you sell it. And that's the right price for the job. It's not cheap or it's not expensive. It's the right price, isn't it? It's the right price. I can't get it any clearer.
But I think that's definitely an issue for garages, working out what the right price is, and that comes back to the plan. It comes back to their mission and their goal in life. Are you trying to be the best man fixing BMWs in the neighbourhood, and you're going to do it right, or are you always price comparing? Are you the MOT? Well, I don't want to go there, but MOTs, discounted MOTs, and labour rates and plugins and diagnostics. What it seems to be is the uneducated businessman or garage guy that set his own business up thinks that price is what's winning the business. It's not.
It's not. And that you'll always get these come and get me prices, James. I saw one the other day. It was £99 for a service and MOT. Right, I'm not going to name them. It's a national. All right. So what's the service? What's the service? I don't know what service is. If you ask 10 technicians to write down what a service is, they have 10 different things. So people just see £99. So take 20 quid VAT out of that. How the hell am I going to do a service and an MOT for 80 quid? If I went and bought oil, it's like 50 quid. I mean, what service is it? I don't know. So again, this is covering this myth about education on the front counter. What is the service and what is the product? This is why this is this much, sir, and it's not the same as that, sir, or madam, or whatever else. And we need to have that ability to be able to do that. But if you don't know what it's costing you in the instance, the time that we're selling, if you don't know what it's costing you, I can go into a workshop space now, James. Give me a space, 10 minutes, I can tell you what you could be doing in turnover and what you will be doing. Right, and that's the basis of your starting of understanding basics of finance. I need to know what's the capacity. What can I be doing? Well, I'm not going to get that because I don't sell every hour that's available. And then it's all about, well, what type of service am I going to do? What's the environment like? Where's the transport links? All this kind of stuff will have an effect on on that business planning journey that we said you need. And remember, also very commonly, that not everyone sells every hour for the same amount, which then reduces the overall labour rate. Because you've got fleet labour rate, friends mate, NHS labour rate, MOT labour rate, whatever else it is. So then your labour rate then gets diluted again. So the average, what I call so this is a shocking stat for you. The average recovery rate of a labour rate on my master financial database that I keep is 78%. So if you're charging 64, you're only getting back 78% of that 64 because you've got some other labour rates.
And that gets you really close to that cost of doing business then. So yeah, it goes below.
It goes below. And that's why they never make any money on their labour. All right. And that's what I want to try and achieve with people is understand, any business, if you don't understand the business metrics, the financial metrics, then don't start.
Andy, if there was one business metric then that you would, recommend, so people maybe, our listener that's listening to this goes, some of this is resonating with me. What would be the thing that they're going to rock up on Monday or Tuesday now after when they next get back to work and look through what they're doing? What would be the one metric you said, do you know what, if you're going to start somewhere, what would be the thing to measure?
I would try and measure what it's costing me to be there per hour.
That's the fundamental.
Simple. That is the fundamental, because that's how we sell our time, James. That's how we sell our commodity. It's labor, skill, knowledge, whatever you want to call it. That's how so the fundamental thing is, what's it costing me to be here?
And do you think that's something that their accountant, as their service provider, if the garage man phoned up the accountant and said, can you do me a favor by Friday? Can you get me my cost of doing business? Is that something in the gift of most standard accountants?
I would hate to say no. It should be a yes. But then again, it's whether they understand the metrics of how our sales are generated by. So if they put parts and labor together to try and work out the metrics, they're not going to get the right metrics. They're not going to get the right answer. And this is the argument I have. You need to learn yourself the correct way so that you can help your accountant to help you, if you know what I mean. You've got to sort of give them the answer. You've got to sort of give them the answer first before they can actually help you, because they won't know how to work out the productivity in the workshop or the efficiency of the workshop, and that has a profound impact on the cost of what it's costing you, because it depends how much you're selling. The more you sell, the less the cost is. The less you sell, the higher the cost.
It's one of those, again, almost businessman running through the jungle, shot by an elephant gun, stunned with the amazing fact that the labor that you buy from a technician has no storage value, and it runs out the minute you didn't use it. And so there's no way of reclaiming, those lost hours. It's one of those, it doesn't store, it can't be transported, you can't move it. If you don't use it when you buy it, it evaporates, doesn't it? And that's where your efficiencies start to shrink and reduce your profitability.
So I did at this garage for 2 of the sites, I did a calculation. I spent the day visiting these garages, and I've got my famous deck chair, which I get and sit in the corner of the workshop, and I just watch for an hour, and all I see is just text moving around. Actually, not spanner in hand working on the car. They're trying to find and search stuff. Anyway, I've done this little graphic, and I worked out that they waste 2.5 hours. There's 8 boys in this workshop. Listen, you're gonna laugh when I tell you. I worked out they wasted 2.5 hours. They waste 2.5 hours a day because of the positioning of the airlines. 2.5 hours a day is wasted because of the positioning of the airlines. Imagine that. Like you said, that time I can't charge for. It's gone, my friend. It's finished. And just the airlines. It takes me 48 seconds to get from one end of the workshop to the end. So it's quite a big workshop, yeah? They've got 2 oil drainers for 8 people that sit right at the end of the workshop.
It's amazing. Again, one of the interesting conversations, Andy, is we talk about it a little bit with the Diag group going, bloody expensive to buy this access to information. I've got this scan tool, but I got to go onto the portal and they're charging me this, that, and the other. And I don't see how I can make it. I've got a fixed price for diagnostics and stuff. I said, whoa. Let me back you up. Let's pull the handbrake on and let's slow it down. When a premium rate phone line came out and you want to phone somebody up for help and they're charging £1 a minute, you think that's bonkers. You think £1 a minute on the phone. I said, if, my friend, you're charging 60 quid an hour in your garage, you are £1 a minute. It's £1 a minute. And when you're not doing stuff, you're losing £1 a minute. When you're doing inefficiency, you're dropping. And so we gear it around if you buy a dealer tool login and that costs you 8 quid and it saves you 25 minutes or 30 minutes on that job, that is pure profit. Take the cost out of the 9, you got your 30 quid, you got 20 odd quid profit. But the £1 a minute thing really it stops them in the tracks. They go, never thought of it like that. Yeah, £1 a minute for messing about. Or in your case, once you ramp that up to multiples, you've got £4 a minute, you've got £8 a minute, you've got £10 a minute.
I know, and these are the efficiencies that I look for in the garage. all the things, so the average efficiency rate of a garage, again, using my data, is 55%, James. I mean, I just, please tell me, 55, we're buying 100 apples every week and we're only selling 55, but we still go and buy another 100. We don't do anything different. We just keep buying 100, right? And we only sell 55 and we throw 45 away. It's nuts, and I don't know. I see it easy, I see so many, and like with, there was a great bunch yesterday, right? And I'm going to be working with them, moving forward. But I see so many improvements that ain't going to cost a lot of money. It's not going to be like get your check back as a lot of zeros. No, it's just thought, man. It's like, bit here, bit there, and it's not about the big thing. It's not like, you've got to reinvent everything. No, just do little things, slowly, surely, and these will have a huge impact, and it's those little, and the efficiency of your workshop is crucial, is the other ingredient that's needed for you to be able to work out what is costing you per hour.
Sage advice there, Andy. Andy, I was gonna go to a couple of quick fire questions now, and if you like, so these can be shoot from the hip. They can be more considered. What would you consider, bearing in mind the conversation we just had, would be the top 3 challenges that the garage business face today, and in light of that, maybe thinking about some of the things they could do to face those challenges. So, what do you think garages are up against in the big 3?
I think the biggest one is the biggest one that everyone's talking about now is finding staff, right? Whether it's technicians or front of house. So there's not enough to go around, right? So that's the first one. Obviously, the rising costs of everything is the second one, I think. So I'll deal with the first one first. The first one, you have to change your mindset now. The old days of the old, we're in a new arena. There ain't enough round. So in order for you to attract people to come out of their existing jobs, assuming they have the right criteria, is you need to think about your pay scales. And forget the day. I think the days have gone where you're going to be paying 35, 36, 37, 38 grand. I think you need to be thinking about something with a 5 in front of it. All right? And that's going to scare the shit out of everyone. Because where am I going to find the money? Well, if you work out what it's costing you to be there and you realize that you're losing money on every hour that you're selling, you might want to think about the proposition as a whole. And that brings on the third problem, which is, are you offering too much to everyone? Are you trying to be everything to everyone? Can we narrow our field a little bit? Can we interrogate our database and see what's making us more money than not, and then slowly divert? You're not going to change it overnight, but you can have a plan. So the first thing is, how do we attract people? Well, I think for technicians, you have to start thinking about 50 plus to get anyone of any adequacy, good enough, right? But I don't think it's only the money anymore. I think it's a bit more involved, a bit more complicated. I think the surroundings, the environment, what else can I attach to that to allow me to first attract them to me and also retain them? Well, I want the whole package. I want them to have the whole lot. I want them to be well paid. Now, what is well paid? Well, well paid is what you have to pay to get someone through the door. And if you carry on advertising around, 32, I'm only paying 32 for a tech, it's 32, then you're only going to be getting a tech around 32, innit? All right? And the moment you start raising the levels, I'm going to be going 40, 42, 43, then you're going to start getting interest, okay? But then it's about supporting them when they come in. Do we have the right tooling and equipment for what we want them to achieve for us? Well, how am I going to extract 42 grand if I haven't got the right setup? So you have to look at the services and the facilities that you have. I think a continually learning environment for them could be a motivation, may not be for every technician. So again, this is about the recruitment stage of how you openly discuss these things. If someone says to you, I'm not really interested in training, would I employ them? I probably wouldn't. Yeah. So I think we have to start thinking about people as commodities themselves, because they are precious. These are the only revenue earners. So I think a salary 20-25% above of what the standard is now, and I think having an environment and a facility to allow them to produce that work is also crucial. All right. The second thing is, I think everything's going up, James. Nothing goes down. Everything's going up. The tremendous pressures that we're having, both in our homes and also in our business, specifically small businesses. I don't think we get a lot of support. Yeah. I reckon the big corporates get all the support. I think the small businesses, you hear rhetoric from the politicians. They don't live in the real world. Yeah. None of them do. So I think you have to keep revisiting your costs on a two yearly cycle. Every 6 months, you have to keep looking at your cost of doing business. And you know what? You have to have courage and belief to raise your price. You have to raise, otherwise you won't survive. And that's one of the key aspects of being a good business person. You have to monitor your costs. We have to pay more to attract people. Our costs have to be covered. And I think having a discipline of looking at your cost every 6 months is also very important. So if I was to open I got asked the question yesterday, actually, how confident are you of opening a garage now? I said, you know what? There's never been a better time to open a garage. I said it in 2009, James. And I sit here in front of you, and I wish I was 10 years younger in today, because there's never, ever been a better time to open a garage. And I reckon if I opened, I'd have a queue of people wanting to come and work with me. Why? Because I'd have a clear vision. I'd communicate that. I have my values. Yes, honesty, respect, give your best. I will treat people like they want to be treated, because they are my biggest assets. I will give them a facility that they can excel in that they've never had before. And we will provide a service to a consumer who appreciates the service that we give, and narrow service, whatever that is, where people see it as a perception of value.
Yeah.
And we will be successful.
Yeah.
So that's really what it's all about.
And I think you're right with running and setting up that effective business with the load in the market, with people booking so far in advance. I think the car supply, new car supply has meant people are keeping older cars for longer. That's not going to change anytime soon. There is a huge amount of work to do. And, when you it should be a barometer, really. If your prices are too cheap, if you ever need that as a guidance, if your booking it's stretching into the distance, you're not under price competition. If your service and value is correct, you can raise your rates. And you're absolutely right. The business machine, based on technical expertise, and let's be right, Andy. When the truck driver crisis came out, and they're starting to pay guys $50,000 to drive a truck or a bus, that vanished.
That vanished, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That vanished overnight. And it's the. I went into. I'm going to mention this because I think it's quite poignant because of what you've just mentioned. So yesterday's dinner, there was a restaurant. It's a pub group. I can't remember what pub group, Chef and Brew, or whatever it was, called the Boathouse next to the hotel. So the garage owner arranged for all of us to have dinner in there. So we said listen to this. We said we'll meet at 7:30. Okay, 7:45. I got in there at 7:00, and I got in there at 7:00 because I wanted to make some notes of the day's training. And just to sort of have a little chat with the team. 25 minutes later, I'm still waiting to be served. There's two young people. I found out one was 19, one was 21. Right, a young girl of 19 and a young man of 21. Queue of people waiting at the bar. People moaning the food weren't ready. I took photographs of 8 tables where food had been on and where people had eaten, where it hadn't been cleared. The bar was full up of old rags and bottles of drink that had been taken away. And you know what? They were so stressed, bless them. There was 2 people running the whole operation. I called the young lady over and I said to her, you know what? You're overworked, underpaid and undervalued. And she looked at me and she goes, That's the first time anyone said that to me. I said, do you mind if I ask how much you get per hour? $6.93. $6.93. And there's only two of them. And there's some finance director sitting in some boardroom saying, why aren't we doing better than what we're doing? Well, why don't you go spend half an hour? So I walked out. We went somewhere else. Because I rang Mo. I said, Mo, we ain't going to get served in here, mate. And I took the photos and I put them in my presentation for the next day. And that's what it's all about. They're only willing to pay £7-8 an hour. What do you expect?
Andy, another quick fire question, and it won't be a quick fire answer, I'm sure. What's your view on, this is a bit about market dynamics now, the consolidation of parts vendors. So we see our friends at LQK and their parent company in the States taking over the other group. Yeah. What do you think is the impact of that on the market? Good, bad, or indifferent?
I'm going to say something that probably most people probably disagree with. I think it's a positive, right? They're going to say, oh, they're going to control too much and everything else. Okay, so what do you want to happen then, boys and girls? Do you want Uniselect to go bust and 3,000 people lose their jobs and 300 branches close down and then we have less supply to us? Or do you want to retain some of these wonderful people that work in this, that you've had a relationship with for years? Yes. When you pick up the phone, you speak to Jane or Tom or whoever it is. And it's the way of the world. If they don't do it, someone else will do it because they're in trouble. They've got no money. So what you want? It's not LKQ's problem that they've got no money. It's the problem of the managers and the directors who haven't managed the business properly. And that's why one company always eats the other one. It's been going on for 500 years and it will carry on for the next 500 years. So we just have to look at it as that's the mechanics and that's the business. And if you don't run your garage business and you don't know what it's costing you per hour, then someone might come and eat you up, isn't it?
I was going to say, it's the full circle. So that business is not been run effectively and efficiently, and LQK is the more successful. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just, I can't do anything about it. I have no influence over it, James. All I can know is that, one, the suppliers has gone, the other one's got bigger. They're going to keep the branches, maybe not all of them, the infrastructure, 80% of the people will be employed. Happy days, move on. I think I've probably got more problems in my garage to worry about whether LKQ or GSF or Group Auto, or I don't care. I just want parts and I want factors to be near me.
Reliable service and good quality product. Yeah.
I don't agree with everything they do, James. I'm vocal with that. I know Andy Hamilton very well and the senior team at ECP. I know people at Auto. I don't agree with everything they do, but they do a lot of good stuff. But then all garages don't do everything properly either. So who are we to shout?
We can't judge. That's right.
No. Let's look after our corner and let them worry about their corner.
Yeah, as a service provider, they'll continue to provide the service. So you've got to be thumbs up for that, haven't you? There's still going to be an independent part supply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also they've got, they've got support things going on. You can buy training from them now. You can buy equipment from them now. You can buy practical anything from them now. We never had that 10. I never had that 12 years ago when I started and 10 years before that. Come on. So they're trying to support us. We don't agree with everything. We agree with most. I'm vocal. It's about communicating. Do you think you could do this a bit differently because it affects us this way? Whatever it is. So I feel that I'm a bit of a voice. They respect that, and I respect what they do. And they're a business at the end of the day, and they need to make a return.
They've all got their teams with all their families to feed. Let's be right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And some of these people have become friends with all of us because we're dealing with the same people when we're all doing parts all the time, whether it's the drivers, whether it's the support people on the phones, the warehouse people, whoever it is.
They're part of our business, like it or loathe it. They're there to support. Cool stuff. Andy, it's been...
What would you rather want? Amazon to come and take them?
This is it, isn't it? When you...
Well, I bet they wouldn't like that happening, isn't it?
I'm looking at Amazon. You mentioned, really interesting you mentioned that. In the States, Amazon have opened up an OE part supply portal where you tap your number in and they're starting to link with dealer groups and independent businesses that are under the wing of the franchise that are now selling OE parts through Amazon. Where is that going to go? That I think.
Well, it ain't going to stay in America, is it?
No, that's right.
Well, so sometimes we've got to be a bit careful about what we wish for.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and maybe not keep criticising, Automotive Alliance or Group Auto or GSF or whatever else. Yeah, you know why? Just stick to the positives of it, because when you need that part at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I know who they ring up. They ring up LKQ because they're the only ones that got it in stock. But they won't publicise it on the social media groups. They just talk about the bad.
Yeah, absolutely right. Andy, it's been charming and delightful as always to solicit your wisdom and get your view. Sometimes controversial, always passionate. And again, always with the benefit of the garage people at the heart of it. And for that you have to be saluted. I know you take the positives. You don't take them well, but I'm gonna just say thanks for doing what you do. It is brilliant. You are driving the standard up. You're helping people run profitable businesses to be here in the long term, helping them provide for their families, running a successful business rather than the unsuccessful business running them. And it's amazing. Keep on doing what you're doing. It is fantastic.
Thank you, James. It's an honour, man. It's a pleasure, to have associations with people like you and the other folk around that we've worked together with over the years. And, made this continue for a while, and I think we are making it. I think you're making a huge difference. And there's not a bad word said about my man, James Dillon. It's all good. And we'll always have the haters, as I call it, and the ones that are jealous and everything else. But you know what? You rise above that. And we just stay on the road, and we're there for garage folk. And I've met some wonderful people on my journey, hardworking, honest people, family people. I'm one of them. I'm just a lay person, passionate about garage folk. And I also like to say thank you to my 4 brand sponsors as well, who without their continued support, and what they're doing for me with my garage folk. So thank you to Schaeffler Rep Expert, Miller's Oils, Phillips, the wonderful people at Phillips, and the wonderful people at Varta. So I have great working relationships with all 4 of them. I think it's important for me to mention them because they're 4 global giants in their own sectors, and it gives me a little bit more credibility having an association with these brands, and they've done some fantastic work for people that have needed it from my network, and I want to say thank you to them too.
You've got to take your hats off, Andy. Those guys supporting your endeavours, they're seeing the benefit in what you're doing, and as you said, to have that support of those global brands is no mean feat, and they believe in what you're doing. And again, it is. It's amazing to get that support.
From where I've come from, to be able to have, to be working with these people is just immense. And also we've got a small circle of other supporters as well, within the workbooks and within our business services that we offer. And not everyone can get into these books. You've got to be selective, and, they've got to be up there. So there's 4 or 5 in there that really have made a difference in the services that they're providing to our garage folk. And hopefully we can add 1 or 2 of those. And obviously you're one of those as well. But hopefully we can continue that.
People doing the right thing for the right reasons, driving the standard up. It's a paragon of virtue, Andy. I've got a couple of quick questions to end on. It's become a bit of a tradition, and we'll probably end up with we'll probably start with the magic wand. So imagine you're in charge of the world and you've got a magic wand and you can give it 2 swooshes. Your down swoosh, you can have a wish, and the up swoosh, you can have a wish. What 2 things would you change for the better in our industry if you could?
The first one is to license our industry. End of. But a license that has meat on the bone, not a tick box. So some will close, but the strong will be stronger, and hopefully it will be recognised as an organisation on par with solicitors, accountants, and that kind of criteria. Because at the moment, I can go and open a shack in a car park, Joe Bloggs Motors, and start working. That's the first one.
It can't be right, can it? It can't be right. It has to be.
It can't be right, okay? A license, a proper license that you have to pay into, where you get audited properly, where there's meat on the bone. And that answers the second one. I'd abolish all the soft franchises that there have been and that there are out there in our associations now. All the soft franchises that people come and throw at you and say to you, oh, join our network and we can do this and we can do that, because that only has one thing. All they want to do is sell you stuff. And all of a sudden you get all these soft franchises and it covers your own brand and your own identity, right? And they do nothing. As long as you've got a light switch and a door and you pay the fee, I can put my plat on there, all right? And that's where the problems rely, because these associations are only inward. No consumer in the world knows what they stand for, what they are, or anything. And if we had a licensing that everyone can understand, that it meant something and our standards got risen, then our labour rates will go up to a reasonable and fair price to charge for the expertise and the knowledge that we've gained over the years. That's what will change. Those two things.
They're really good points, because I think, again, they drive the profitability, ultimately, of the garage up and raise the standard. So I know there's a lot of reluctance, and that will be controversial, the licensing. But I think you when you analyse it in depth, you find that's a really hard one to come against. Why wouldn't you want it? Really, when you look at some of the...
I think if I had a choice to do anything, that would be that. But it has to have meat on the bones. There has to be credibility, like what doctors go through, solicitors go through, to keep their accreditation, their license to work, if that's the right word to use, yeah? Because that will put an emphasis on us to make sure that we have the infrastructure, we have the services, we look after our team, we continually train and invest. But that comes with a cost, and that cost will be passed on to the vehicle owner, because I believe for the last 60 years they've had it
too good. Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah.
From the independent sector anyway.
100%. Well, on that bombshell, Andy, I'm going to thank you deeply for sharing your thoughts and visions and views. It's been an absolute delight to have you on and spend time in your company.
Yeah, it's been good.
I'm always inspired by your view, by your passion, and thanks ever so much. And who knows, we might try and do this again. There's so much we could talk about and come up with. So
I think we could talk all day.
If we were allowed, but...
Well, you make me talk all day because of the questions you're asking.
It's been an amazing. Yeah.
It's been brilliant. I've been really looking forward to it. And sorry I had to cancel the last one, but but we've got there now, and hopefully we can do it again.
Amazing. Once again, thanks, Andy. Thanks ever so much for all you do, for your appearance here, but for more importantly, all you do for the industry, and keep on keeping on.